Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 247. Mount Longxiu, Letter Writing. Chu Wanning lay on the bed. His head was heavy and his consciousness was sometimes clear, sometimes fuzzy. In a trance, he seemed to hear two people arguing. It seemed to be Shi Mei and Mo Ran. Later, the sound of arguing disappeared and only the sound of the wind could be heard. Later, he seemed to be lying on a warm bed and someone was talking to him. The broken voice seemed to come from across the ocean and he couldn't hear it clearly. Occasionally, he heard a few words, something about his other life, something about a Shizun. He vaguely felt that it was Shi Mei's voice, but he didn't have much energy to digest it. These words quickly dispersed like the morning fog. His memories became complete little by little and slowly became clearer and clearer. The memories of his other life were like rainwater flowing into a river and finally rushing to the sea. The first thing he dreamed of was of a serene corridor in Shisheng Peak, at Red Lotus Pavilion. It was surrounded with vines and flowers. When the wind blew, snow would fall down and the paper would be covered with flower petals. He was sitting under the porch, writing a letter in front of a stone table. The letter couldn't be sent out as Taxian Jun prohibited him from any contact with outsiders, nor did he allow him to raise pigeons or any other animals. In fact, outside the Red Lotus Pavilion, there were countless layers of hissing forbidden spells placed on top of another. But still, Chu Wanning wrote. It was so lonely. If he was by myself, he could probably spend the rest of his life like this. But it would be a lie to say that he wasn't bored. The letter was being written to Xuemeng but didn't contain much. It was nothing more than asking about his recent situation, whether he was well, how the sun and the moon were outside and how his old friends were. However, there were actually no old friends. So, he slowly wrote the letter for an entire afternoon. There wasn't much content. At the end of the letter, he was a little lost in thought. He vaguely remembered the days when his three young disciples were by his side. He had taught them how to write poems and paint. Xuemeng and Shi Mei learned very quickly. Only Mo Ran would write a character wrong 3 or 4 times, so he had to teach him step by step. What did he write at that time? In a daze, Chu Wanning slowly unfurled the brush and ink on the rice paper. He first wrote, "The body is a Bodhi tree, the heart is like a mirror." Then, he wrote, "Life has no roots, drifting like dust on the streets." Every stroke was neat and tidy. Whether it was writing a book or writing a letter, his handwriting had always been clear and proper, as he doesn't want those who read it to not be able to understand it. He was also afraid that his disciples would follow this wrong example and go astray. His words were like his person, his backbone was extremely proud. He wrote, "Where are my old friends? And the sea is vast and the mountains are far away." Later on, the wind blew the Chinese wisteria flowers to the ground, some would settle on his note. He couldn't bear to brush them away. Looking at the faint yet magnificent purple, the tip of his brush gradually changed as he wrote, "Waking up from a dream to see the drizzle, the mountains and rivers are still as gentle as before." It was very normal. "I wish that I am like the stars and you are like the moon. Every night the light is bright and clear." As he wrote, his eyes couldn't help but soften, as if he had returned to the peaceful days of the past. The wind blew, causing the paper to flutter. Some of the paperweights that were not properly pressed were blown up and scattered all over the ground in the mottled fragrant afternoon sun. Chu Wanning put down the brush, sighed and went to pick up the letters and poems on the ground. One by one, they fell on the grass, by the stone steps, among the fallen flowers and among the withered leaves. He was just about to pick up a piece of paper floating amidst the fragrance of fallen flowers. Suddenly, a slender, well-proportioned and well-defined hand appeared in his field of vision. Before he could, that person had picked up that piece of paper. "What are you writing?" Chu Wanning was startled. He straightened up and saw a tall and handsome man standing in front of him. It was Taxian Jun, Mo Weiyu, who had arrived at the Red Lotus Pavilion at some unknown time. Chu Wanning said. Nothing. Mo Ran was dressed in a black and gold robe, wearing a 9-patterned crown and a dragon scale thumb ring on his thin and pale finger. It was obvious that he had just returned from the imperial court. He first glanced coldly at Chu Wanning and then flattened the paper in his hand. After reading 2 paragraphs, his eyes narrowed. Seeing your letter is as good as seeing you. After a moment of silence, he looked up. What does this mean? Nothing. Chu Wanning wanted to take the letter back, but Mo Ran simply raised his hand to stop him. Don't. He said, why are you so nervous? After saying this, he carefully read the letter again. His gaze swept across several lines and he said calmly, oh. You wrote this for Shui Mang? I just wrote it casually. Chu Wanning didn't want to involve others, so he said, I didn't intend to send it. Mo Ran sneered, you don't have the ability to send it. Chu Wanning had nothing to say to him, so he turned around and went back to the table to tidy up the ink, paper, and inkstone. Unexpectedly, Taxian Jun followed him. His black and gold robes fluttered as he pressed down on the letter that he was about to put away. He looked up and saw the Taxian Jun's mischievous face. Fine, if he wanted it, he'll give it to him. So, he withdrew his hand and went to take another one, but it was pressed down by Mo Ran again. Things repeated this way for a while until finally Chu Wanning lost his patience. He didn't know what this person was up to, so he looked up and asked gloomily, what do you want? What do you meant by seeing your letter is as good as seeing you? Mo Ran looked at him with deep eyes and his thin lips moved slightly. Speak. The branches and leaves of the flowers sway gentle, and in the mottled light and shadow, Chu Wanning couldn't help but think of when Mo Ran had just become his disciple. His smile and words were very gentle and he asked respectfully with a smile, Shizun, the body is the Bodhi tree, the heart is as clear as a mirror, what does this mean? Shizun, can you teach me? In contrast, Taxian Jun's aggressive attitude made Chu Wanning's heart ache. He suddenly lowered his head, stopped talking and closed his eyes. He didn't say anything and Mo Ran began to gradually become gloomy. In this silence, he picked up the letter on the table and read it one by one. The more he read, the more dangerous his eyes became. He murmured thoughtfully and the man who could give the title of Wang Ba to his reigning years looked around the stone table, racking his brains for the meaning of these sentences. In the end, he suddenly swept the stack of letters to the ground with a sinister expression. He looked up coldly. Chu Wanning, do you miss him? No. He didn't want to be entangled with him, so he turned around to leave. However, he hadn't taken more than 2 steps when his sleeve was grabbed, followed by a violent and ferocious grip on his chin. As the world spun, he was suddenly pushed onto the stone table. Mo Ran's grip was so strong, so ruthless that in the blink of an eye, there were bruises on his cheeks. The sun shone through the vines, shining into Chu Wanning's eyes. Those eyes reflected Taxian Jun's somewhat crazed and twisted face. Handsome but pale. Taxian Jun had no sense of shame. With the sky as a cover and the earth as bed, he immediately started to tear Chu Wanning's clothes apart. If there was another possibility, why would he be pushed down onto the stone table? Then tearing his clothes apart had obviously made that mood. Chu Wanning almost flew into a rage out of humiliation as he shouted, Mo Weiyu. His tone was full of anger and disappointment, but it didn't extinguish Mo Ran's evil fire. Instead, it was like hot oil falling and splashing into a raging flame. When he suddenly pushed into him, Chu Wanning only felt extreme pain. He didn't want to touch Mo Ran's back, so he only spasmodically grabbed the edge of the stone table, breathing heavily, you beast. Mo Ran's eyes were covered with a bloody aura, but he didn't react to being called a beast. Instead, he said gloomily, it's fine if you don't explain. This venerable one really shouldn't ask you. You can't be considered this venerable one's Shizun anymore. His movements were fierce and ferocious. He was only seeking his own pleasure and comfort while treating Chu Wanning's feelings like they were grass, worthless. What is Wanning now? He was almost gnashing his teeth as he said, "You're just a side concubine, a forbidden mistress, you can only spread your legs for me." In the midst of their entanglement, Moran turned him over. The paper and ink on the table were all messed up, as the writing brushes fell to the ground. Chu Wanning was pressed to the side of the table. His body was in endless pain and in front of him was a boundless expanse. He looked at every word and sentence, every stroke of the pen. The body is a Bodhi tree, the heart is a mirror. Where was my old friend? The sea is vast, and the mountains are far away. Every word hit his heart. In front of him, he could still see the young Moran smiling at him. The dark eyelashes trembled gently, like black butterfly flowers perching on the ground. However, he could hear Taxian Jun's heavy breathing by his ear. He was insulting and humiliating him as he said hoarsely, "Chu Wanning. Heh, this venerable one's consort Chu actually has someone else in his heart. What do you mean by I wish that I am like the stars and you are like the moon? Every night the light is bright and clear." There was a murderous intent in his voice. "Do you really think I don't understand at all?" Chu Wanning gritted his teeth and leaned on the stone table. His body was bitten and pinched, and there were red marks all over him, but his phoenix eyes remained stubborn. "You don't understand." He knew that talking back would only get him fiercer treatments, but he still stubbornly said, "You don't understand. You don't know who the old friend was, and you don't know why the sea is vast and the mountain is far away. You don't know who the Lord is, and who the moon is. You don't understand." After a long time of absurdity, Moran finally let him go. Chu Wanning's clothes were in disarray. He lay in fallen Chinese wisteria flowers, in the middle of poems and ink. There were red marks at the corners of his eyes, like the color of a rouge flower that was pinched off and died on the tip of his fingers. His lips were bitten and covered in blood. He got up and slowly put on his clothes. After being detained for so long, from the first time he had his heart pierced and his bones gouged out to his current grief, there was no greater sorrow than a dead heart. What else could he do now that his spirit core was destroyed? The so-called dignity was only left after the fact. He had to stubbornly put on his clothes and was unwilling to let others do the dirty work. While he was doing all this, Moran sat by the stone table, holding the letters he had written and looked at them one by one. When he saw the poem that read, "Waking up from a dream to see the drizzle, the mountains and rivers are still as gentle as before," his hand seemed to freeze slightly, but he quickly turned over the letter and then said with sarcasm, "Your bones are soft, but your handwriting is still pretty good." He put the stack of letters into his robe, and then stood up. The wind blew through his robes and the golden threads on his black robe flowed with splendor. "Let's go." Chu Wanning did not say anything. Moran glanced at him, the Chinese wisteria shadows made his black eyes seem even deeper. "You're not going to send me off?" Under the flowing shadows of the trees, Chu Wanning's voice was low and hoarse as he slowly said, "I taught this to you before." Moran stared blankly. "What?" "Seeing the letter is like seeing you, it's comforting." After he said this, he finally raised his eyelashes and glanced at the man. "I taught you to write before, but you forgot." "You taught me to write before." Moran frowned. He was not deliberately teasing Chu Wanning, but looking at his appearance, he really did not have any impression of it. The person who was about to leave stopped again. Moran asked, "When did this happen?" Chu Wanning looked at him and said, "A long time ago." After he said this, he turned around and walked into the room of the Red Lotus Pavilion. Moran stood in the same place, not leaving for a while, but also not coming after him. Later, Chu Wanning caught a glimpse of him from the window and he returned to the stone table, flipping through the remaining stack of letters under the paperweight. Chu Wanning closed the window. That night, because he was tormented and did not know how to properly wash himself, he caught a cold. Originally, it was not a big deal and he thought that Mo Ran would not know about it. But that day, for some reason, he heard Lu Gonggong say that it seemed that Song Kayutong had cooked a bowl of wontons and for some reason, it had angered Taxian Jun. Not only did he not stay the night at the Empress residence, he did not even eat dinner and left in a huff. Late at night, it began to rain heavily. At this time, someone came to the Red Lotus Pavilion. His Majesty has ordered that Grand Master Chu is to go to the palace. These personal attendants clearly knew the relationship between Mo Ran and Chu Wanning, but they were still asked by Mo Ran to call him Grand Master Chu. If it was not due to some trace of kindness in his heart, then it was done out of harshness and malice. Chu Wanning's body was in great pain. His face was pale and gloomy as he answered, "Not going." His Majesty has. Am not going. Sleeping with an injured person could not be interesting. In the past, whenever he was not feeling right, Mo Ran would not force him to do anything. However, not long after they left, the servant who had been sent away returned. He entered the Red Lotus Pavilion and bowed in front of Chu Wanning, who was coughing violently. Then, with an indifferent expression he said, His Majesty had ordered that it's a minor imposition and that Grand Master Chu should head to the Wushan Palace to serve him. End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 248. Mount Longxiu, forgotten. Chu Wanning knew that he had no other choice but to obey. So, he put on a thick fox fur cloak, opened an oiled paper umbrella and went to the Wushan Palace. Inside the hall, the silver lanterns were shining brightly. The 99 lanterns were brightly lit, just like the Milky Way, illuminating the entire hall of Wushan Palace. It was common for the attendants on the both sides to serve Grand Master Chu and thus they all bowed and greeted him. Chu Wanning expressionlessly walked through the side corridor towards the back of the hall. When he reached the painted red door, he stretched out his hand and pushed it open. The room was very warm, very different from the cold rain outside. There was even a strong wine fragrance that assailed the nostrils. Mo Ran was lying lazily on the bed, his white jade-like fingers holding a small red clay pot, drinking wine. "You're here. Sit." Chu Wanning walked to the furthest bamboo mat, sat down, and closed his eyes. Mo Ran did not force him to come closer. He was already a little drunk, and his pale face was a little red. He squinted his eyes and there was a little light in his dark purple eyes. After taking another sip, Mo Ran looked up at the carved dragons and phoenixes on the ceiling as his fingers lightly tapped on his knees. He suddenly asked, "Do you still know how to make wontons?" Chu Wanning's eyelashes moved slightly but he still said in the end, "No." Mo Ran was a little unwilling to let it go. "You did. It was that year, the year he left." "I can't do it well." Chu Wanning's face was expressionless. "You're right, it was a poor imitation." Mo Ran narrowed his eyes. "Are you holding a grudge against me?" "No." "Then what if this venerable one asks you to make one now?" Chu Wanning did not speak. Mo Ran stared at him intensely. "I'm asking you a question. If this venerable one asks you to make one now, would you still be willing?" "Even if I did?" Chu Wanning finally opened his eyes and looked at him coldly. "Would you eat it?" Mo Ran did not expect to be checkmated. A layer of red appeared on his cheeks as if he was drunk but also angry. The emotions in his eyes suddenly became very blank and he was in a daze for a while before he reacted. He gritted his teeth and angrily threw the wine cup on the table, spilling the fine pear white wine all over the floor. Mo Ran stood up gloomily, his figure like a mountain. He stepped over the broken pottery and strode in front of Chu Wanning, grabbing him by the collar. "You, Song Kaiyan," Taxian Jun gritted his teeth, you, all of you, you're all useless." He let go of Chu Wanning and circled around like a vulture, pacing back and forth. Suddenly, his footsteps stopped. He turned his head and stared at Chu Wanning, asking, When did you teach the line that said seeing your letter is as good as seeing you? Taxian Jun was now half drunk and there was no rational thought behind his words at all. He just said whatever came to his mind. How come this venerable one don't remember at all? His wrist was grabbed by a large, cold hand. Mo Ran grabbed him and dragged him to the desk. He spread out the paper from a pile of scrolls. Mo Ran said, "Write it again. Teach me again." Chu Wanning was already suffering from a slight fever and being pressured like this, he became more and more stifled in his rage. His face turned red and he coughed. Mo Ran put a writing brush in his hand and said gloomily, "Write." He impatiently urged, "Hurry up." Chu Wanning's spiritual core broke during the previous battle between the master and disciple. His body was still in bad condition. As he coughed, blood foam came out of his throat. Mo Ran was stunned. He stared at the specks of blood and then slowly let go of his hand. "It's just writing, what's the meaning of this?" Finally, Chu Wanning stopped coughing. He sighed and wiped the blood on his lips with a handkerchief. He looked up, took a deep breath and looked at Mo Ran. "In the past, you would write this opening at the start of every letter. I'm afraid you haven't written for too long, so you forgot." "I wrote a letter." Mo Ran stared at him with his dark eyes. "Write to who?" He was almost angry. "Write to who? Who else can I write to in this world? You're making it up, you're just making it up, a load of nonsense." When Mo Ran said these words, he seemed tired and depressed, and his eyes were shining with a misty light. It was at that time that Chu Wanning vaguely felt that something was amiss. But he didn't think much of it and thought that Mo Ran was just drunk and had a bad memory. So, he just frowned and didn't answer. In the study of the Wushan Palace, there was a letter box. In it were all the letters written in Shi Sheng Peak, locked in a kinkan pouch. Mo Ran was like a caged beast, pacing back and forth a few times. Suddenly, he remembered the existence of the letter box and took out the dusty box. He then opened the old letters one by one. Those letters were mostly written by the disciples of the sect and were categorized according to the sect's elders. Most of the people who wrote the letters died in the year Mo Ran betrayed the sect. Among them, Elder Yu Heng had the least disciples. There were only 3, so it was very easy to find them. Mo Ran quickly flipped through a thick stack of letters. He opened them with trembling hands. His handwriting was not bad, beginner-like, and crooked, but he wrote it seriously. He looked at the letters one by one. On each letter was written, "Seeing the letter is as good as seeing you, it's comforting." This line was written in every letter. Mo Ran's fingers were trembling, and his eyes were shining with a strange light. "Mother, seeing the letter is like meeting you. Sunshija, seeing the letter is like." Those ancient names made him tremble, and made him uncomfortable. His eyes narrowed and dark clouds gathered on his handsome face. Chu Wanning stood at the side. At first, he didn't care, but soon Mo Ran's expression made him feel strange. He couldn't help but lock his gaze on the man in front of the desk, flipping through the old letters and acting like a madman. A small terror extended its sharp beak and knocked on Chu Wanning's heart. Something was wrong. He slowly walked over and looked at Mo Ran's blank then crazed expressions as he read the letters. What could possibly be wrong here? My mother is already dead. Suddenly, Mo Ran muttered and looked at Chu Wanning. Why would I write to her? Chu Wanning watched his every move from the side. That kind of terror pecked at his heart, as if some kind of bloody darkness was about to break out of its shell. Dark clouds descended. It was strange to forget the opening line, "Seeing the letter is like seeing." That he had written so many times, but it wasn't impossible. But to forget so many letters he had written to the point of not even having any impression of them, this was too strange. Mo Ran was still looking at each letter, seeing the letter. Seeing the letter. That pair of eyes that were so black that they were almost purple flashed with a painful light, so contradictory. It really did seem like he was missing an important part of his memory. He seemed to hear the sound of a hard shell about to crack. Chu Wanning held his breath and his spine was almost numb. Apart from the two of them, there was no one else in the study. In the dead silence, Chu Wanning moved his lips, and then said softly, "Don't you remember? You said that although your mother couldn't receive the letters, you still wanted to write to her." Mo Ran suddenly looked up. Chu Wanning only felt his blood turn cold bit by bit and his breath turn to ice. "The first character you learned to write was not your own name." Mo Ran was stunned, and said softly, "Then what was it?" "The first character you asked me to teach you to write was Mother." Outside, lightning flashed and thunder roared as the wind howled mournfully. It was as if countless ghost claws were slapping on the window, shaking the window paper and wooden lattices. A bolt of lightning struck, illuminating the world with its desolate light. Taxian Jun muttered. "You taught me? Why don't I have any recollection of it?" "None at all." The wind blew, causing the trees to fall and the shadows to sway. The mountains and courtyards were filled with evil ghosts and vengeful spirits. Chu Wanning's face was pale. He stared intently at Mo Ran. "You don't remember?" His heart pounded like a drum. After a moment of silence, Mo Ran responded with a question of his own, "Remember what?" The drum stopped. The tiny beak finally pecked through the shell. Terrifying emotions filled the sky as it swept across the world, rushing straight towards the only sober person in the room. Chu Wanning's scalp went numb. He doesn't remember? How can he not remember? Back then, Mo Ran had said that he wanted to write to his mother. He had written over 300 letters and said that he wanted to collect a total of 1,000 letters. Then, he would burn them to the ground during the Feast of the Hungry Ghost and burn them for his mother who was in the netherworld. How could he forget about writing 300 letters so easily? His lips trembled slightly and he suddenly had an extremely terrifying thought. Chu Wanning said hoarsely, "You. Do you remember what you said when you first saw Tianwen?" "What did I say?" Mo Ran said, "How long has it been? How can I remember it so clearly?" "You said that you also want to have such holy weapon." Chu Wanning said, "You also want to have something like Tianwen." The drunk man asked him with a hint of mockery in his eyes, "Why would I want Tianwen for? To kill or to interrogate?" Chu Wanning whispered, "Earthworms." Back then, outside of the Red Lotus Pavilion, the young boy smiled and said to him while holding an oil paper umbrella, "I was saving the earthworms." But at this moment, Taxian Jun narrowed his wolf-like eyes and asked in confusion, "What earthworms?" Outside, thunder broke through the sky and purple lightning flashed through the night. There was a loud rumbling sound. Chu Wanning suddenly pursed his lips as his brown eyes trembled slightly. He felt a bone-piercing chill. That night, Mo Ran did not do anything to Chu Wanning. He really drank a little too much and then he held the letters in a daze. Later, Mo Ran fell asleep on top of the table. As he slept, he muttered, "What earthworms? There are no earthworms." Suddenly, a strong wind blew open the window and with a bang, the mountain wind mixed with the heavy rain poured in, immediately extinguishing the few lights by the window. The room suddenly became dark. Chu Wanning stood beside Mo Ran, his teeth chattering. He lowered his head to look at the sleeping man. The uncertain thoughts in his mind became clearer and clearer. Why did Mo Ran not remember these scattered past events? Why did he selectively forget past events? Was it because he was drunk? Was it a coincidence? Or, did someone deliberately erase the kindness in his heart? Taxian Jun, who was sleeping on the table, murmured softly, "Cold." Chu Wanning's blood ran cold and his whole body was numb. When he heard Mo Ran say it was cold, he instinctively walked slowly to the window. He raised his hand and closed the window, blocking out the wind and rain outside. After doing all this, Chu Wanning did not leave. He was in a daze, as he put his forehead on the window engraved with a bat deer pattern. His knuckles were white like jade. After a while, he slowly took out a crumpled talisman from his lapel. The Rising Dragon Talisman. He no longer had a spiritual core, and Moran thought he could no longer activate any spell, so he did not bother to take away the talismans that Chu Wanning used to have. In fact, what Moran thought was not wrong. Chu Wanning bit the tip of his finger and dripped more than 10 drops of blood, which almost soaked the Rising Dragon Talisman. Then, the little dragon on it listlessly floated out. Its whole body emitted a weak light and it weakly raised its head. Ah! Chu Wanning, long time no see. The little dragon could not stand steadily. Its claws took a few steps on the paper and then it fell back to the paper with a thud. It felt wronged and confused. Why didn't you look for this venerable one for so long? Why did you only give this venerable one a little bit of spiritual energy? Oh, it's really spiritual energy. It's not even spiritual power. What happened to you? It's a long story, so let's not talk about it. Chu Wanning gently picked it up and put it on his palm. Please, do me a favor. Zhong Wen when it's busy, Xia Yingchun when it's not. The little dragon sighed, but its power was closely related to Chu Wanning, so it didn't even have the strength to complain. It drooped its head listlessly. Do tell, what do you want this venerable one to do for you this time? Chu Wanning took it and put it next to the ear of the sleeping Moran. His fingers clenched into a fist and sank into his palm. Chu Wanning's originally unpleasant complexion became even paler. Do your best. See if there's any active spell on his body that shouldn't be there. In fact, that brilliant and gentle youth who was reluctant to kill even an earthworm at the beginning had turned into a devil in the end. As his Shizun, how could he not have the slightest suspicion? He looked on helplessly as his disciple killed Xue Zhenyang, Madame Wang, Zhang Shi, and Ye Wangzi. He massacred the Rufeng sect. He trampled on everyone's bones. He looked on as Moran killed. He looked on as Moran's hands were covered in blood with his face and body splashed with blood. He stood among the pile of corpses and looked back at him with a sinister grin. He was heartbroken, but how could he not find it strange? Moran was originally not this kind of person. But when the little paper dragon did its best to help Chu Wanning draw the sigil of a spell on the paper, Chu Wanning was still stunned even though he was prepared for it. A love spell. Moran actually had a love spell on him. After the little dragon finished drawing the sigil, it lost the last of its strength. It turned into a wisp of green smoke and disappeared into the Rising Dragon Talisman. Chu Wanning held the thin piece of paper. It was as if a mountain had collapsed on his head, crushing it like rotten wood. But after forcing himself to calm down and looking at it over and over again, Chu Wanning found that there was something wrong with the sigil of this love spell. It was actually upside down. End chapter.